Hey everybody.
Hey everybody, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Shiraz Farooq and Sydney Farooq, DaBootyDoc Talk from Tampa, Florida at Colorado, America. How are you guys?
Yes, how's everyone doing tonight? Thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about something important today.
You know, we're always talking about your booty. This is why the talk is called the DaBootyDoc Talk, which is
Very
a
important.
frank conversation with a proctologist like me, and my spouse is here to ask the questions.
Just a common old lady.
And she's bringing the humor and the common layman questions and explanations that are easy for everybody to understand, because
That's right.
medical people, we use a lot of fancy medical jargon and nobody can understand that.
Nope. So we need to hear the simplified version of life and butts. So
No ifs, but buts.
but lots of butts.
But
So yeah, but we're not trying to give medical information. We just want this to be educational
and entertaining.
entertaining, and
Right.
a good social space for if you need to, ask any questions or have any inquiries, or you can silently sit there and watch and let us answer those questions for you.
But for the people who have been watching us, thank you very much for supporting us. We very appreciate you. We guys appreciate you a lot. Thank you very much.
Joining right now?
Joining from Tampa, Florida. We have some people here. So we wanted to go over a very simple topic today.
That's right.
We thought we'll hone it down to a very simple question that a lot of our patients ask. Why am I bleeding from my butt?
Right. Rectal bleeding. So we narrowed down the top 5 causes. Figured we could get that information out there. There might be other reasons too, but here's what we got for you.
Because when you're pooping in your pants and you see blood, okay, that's a kind of scary thing to have, because when you see blood in your underwear or your toilet, it kind of freaks you out.
No matter if it's a little drop or not, any kind of blood is scary, right? Concerning.
Yeah, I have many patients come to me with, everybody has a phone now, so everybody takes a picture of their poop and underwear and stuff, and like, Doc, I got blood clots, I got frank bleeding, I got black stuff.
What color is it?
So people get not only grossed out by what comes out, they also panic when they see bleeding.
And then they Google it.
And then then they get worse, and then they come to us all scared. So my thought was that maybe we can make it easier for people to understand top 5 things that can cause bleeding, and approach it in a manner which will be easy for them to understand and beneficial to them.
Yes. So which is our number 1 for rectal bleeding causes?
So whenever a patient comes in with rectal bleeding, which could be on the toilet paper or in the toilet bowl or when you wipe, or it could be frank blood gushing out or blood clots. Okay, so we call this bright red blood per rectum, BRBPR. I don't know how I came up with this but this is a medical terminology example. So bright red blood per rectum basically means poop in the blood. Okay, so when a common person sees blood when they wipe, the first thing that comes to your mind is, have I got the roids? Do I have hemorrhoids? Which should be called asteroids, but somehow we messed it up, and now we're calling hemorrhoids.
So hemorrhoids are a very common cause of rectal bleeding. They're not something that's necessarily visible. So a lot of people don't know that they exist until they start noticing symptoms.
So they can be 2 types. There are internal hemorrhoids and external hemorrhoids. Most commonly, the bleeding comes from internal hemorrhoids because they are inside the lining where the blood vessels are. External hemorrhoids are usually outside, and they can sometimes bleed if they are thrombosed, meaning that they have a blood clot in them. So if you suddenly wake up one morning and you have a lump around your anus and it's painful and tender and it starts to bleed in a couple of days, then you probably had a blood clot called thrombosed external hemorrhoid, and that blood.
Now, these are pretty easy to notice because they are very painful. It's usually kind of an emergent situation where all of a sudden you're having major swelling, possible bleeding.
Thrombosed external hemorrhoid is a pain in the butt.
a literal, true pain in the butt.
And
So-
causes bleeding sometimes.
So that can be a more obvious hemorrhoidal situation where you have bleeding, but internal hemorrhoids might bleed and you don't
that's the
notice until you
most
use the bathroom.
common. That's the most common cause. When you wipe, sometimes you may see blood, a little tinge or more bleeding. Some people notice a lot of bleeding.
Mhm.
Some people actually notice the hemorrhoids coming out. They come out, they have to push them back in. Sometimes they just hang out all the time. They don't want to go back in. So there are many ways hemorrhoids can present.
Yes.
So our goal is to not gross you guys out, but tell you that asteroids in your butt are called hemorrhoids.
It's a reality. So
And NASA has
rectal
not fixed that problem.
rectal
yet.
bleeding doesn't mean you have cancer. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Rectal bleeding most
be.
commonly, the first cause is hemorrhoids.
right.
Okay, and hemorrhoids are blood vessels that can burst or can leak, and that these blood vessels are a cushion around the anus. And the hemorrhoids help in controlling the anal sphincter tone. So we try to call them the speed bumps at the end. So they kind of slow your bowel movement down so you don't evacuate too quickly. So they act like a gate also. So hemorrhoidal cushions or the blood flow in that area sometimes get bigger, and you can have profuse bleeding or a little bit of bleeding.
Now, what if you have hemorrhoids and they're bleeding? What causes it to bleed? Just the natural action of using the bathroom?
Well,
Is it
there's a couple
you're
of things. I mean,
constipated,
like
you're
if you're
pushing, or
exactly all those things.
the type of food you
Constipation,
eat.
pushing. So when we are going to talk about prevention and treatment, I'm going to bring it up. So I just wanted to throw out the 5 causes, and then I'm going to talk about how we're going to prevent them and how you're going to treat them.
Okay.
So after hemorrhoids, the number 2 cause of bleeding from your anus or bleeding from your butt or poop or bloody poop is an anal fissure.
Mm.
Do you guys know what anal fissure is?
Maybe heard that term before, fissure.
Fissure. Fissure is a crack in the butt.
So basically a little butt paper cut.
Yes, or a larger paper cut, but it's a paper cut, like sharp cut around your anus, inside the anus, and it causes excruciating pain. So patients,
Just a little cut.
just a little
Lot of
cut is a
pain.
true pain in the butt, guys. So when
So usually patients are presenting symptoms like when I poop, it feels like I'm pooping glass or something very sharp pain. So
or you're having your anus sliced with a knife. That's what they describe it to us.
mhm,
So these patients have pain and they have bleeding.
mhm.
So rectal pain that is sharp, knife-like, cuts through you, irritates you after bowel movements, you have severe itching and burning for hours afterwards, and it continues, that's an anal fissure. Along with bleeding that can happen in drops, blood clots, wiping, etc.
Usually
may
more
know.
so when you're wiping because you're touching that area that has the cut. So commonly to bleed during wiping on the toilet paper. So
Number 3, do you know what that is?
let me go.
The number 3 cause of rectal bleeding is
Irritable bowel syndrome.
diverticulosis. Diverticulosis is more common than and then I'll talk about IBS.
Okay. So it is on the list.
So it's kind of.
Mhm.
Diverticulosis are pockets in the colon. These pockets develop with age. So if you're 50 years old, you have less than 10 to 20% chance of diverticulosis, which goes up to 50% or more when you turn 80 and above.
We had a podcast on this, so you have to go back and tell you what
So,
episode it
so
was.
when you are having diverticulosis, you have pockets in the colon. These pockets can become bigger, and food can get stuck in them. And these have tiny blood vessels around them that sometimes can bleed. And that bleeding is sometimes massive. You know, these patients come in with a bucket of blood in their toilet, blood clots, they may pass out from it, they may have a spill of blood on the toilet floor, and sometimes they're so scared they end up in the emergency room. And sometimes
Should they go to the emergency room?
sometimes if they have low blood pressure, if they bleed a lot, if they're consecutively bleeding, yes, they need to be in the emergency room.
I mean, if I had that experience happen, I'm pretty sure I would call a doctor of some kind.
Probably you're young to have divertical bleeding, so as you get older, in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you may have divertical bleeding as a common cause. So that's one thing to look out for.
Okay. What's number 4?
Number 4 is inflammatory bowel disease and not irritable bowel syndrome. IBS is irritable bowel syndrome, which has diarrhea and constipation, but it does not have bleeding with it. When you start to develop bleeding with diarrhea and constipation, and you're thinking about inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, these are autoimmune abnormalities of the colon which destroy the lining, cause ulcers, eat up like Pac-Man eats up the lining, and you develop various areas where you can bleed. And that bleeding could be every day. You could have accompanied diarrhea, liquid bowel movements, blood clots, or profuse diarrhea with bleeding. So that's something that you have to be aware of and worry about. And ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease are part of inflammatory bowel disease.
That's what I was going to ask.
Are
they related?
They are not related, but they group together because they're both autoimmune problems. Crohn's disease can affect anywhere from the mouth to the anus. Ulcerative colitis continues from the anus up towards the colon. It usually does not involve the small intestine. So ulcerative colitis is higher risk for colorectal cancer, but Crohn's disease affects more parts of the gastrointestinal tract. Both of them are very complicated problems. Both of these require treatment and care and prevention. So you do need to see a doctor or a provider.
As with all of these problems.
Does that make sense for most people? I think we've been clear about what we're talking about.
So far.
So irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, is different than IBD.
Which we also have a podcast episode on.
Correct. So guys, please listen to our podcast if you're interested. We're trying to give you some layman terminology, and hopefully that'll help.
Yeah.
The 5th cause, number 5, is colorectal cancer.
I mentioned it earlier.
Yes, and that's something that's in the back of every person, okay? I had a young gentleman today in his 20s, and he was worried about cancer. I was like, look, you're not going to get colorectal cancer. It can happen, but the chances are you can develop it later in life. So with age, the risk for colorectal cancer increases. 150,000 people with colorectal cancer die every year in America. That's a big number.
Yeah.
It's the number 2, colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer in both men and women.
That's why in March every year we celebrate colorectal cancer awareness. So if you've been affected by that, near and dear to your heart how serious it is. But for those of us who have escaped being affected by it so far, either whether it's a family, friend, whatever, you don't think about it every day until you're bleeding from your butt.
And bleeding from the butt with colorectal cancer usually has other symptoms. You may have rectal pain, you may have loss of weight, you may have itching, burning, you may have diarrhea. You could have some other symptoms with it. But those other symptoms could mean that the cancer's been growing for a while.
Right.
So,
I've heard patients tell the story where they notice the bleeding and then find out they're already stage 3 or 4.
Correct. I have had patients like that who come to me and say, hey doc, I've been bleeding, I think it's a hemorrhoid. And I think when I look at it, I'm like, it's not a hemorrhoid, bro, this is something else. So, these are things that we have to be cautious, careful. We have to tell our patients in a manner where they understand that we can help them diagnose it and treat it.
And that's the purpose of what we're doing here too, because we're trying to encourage those people that wait 10 years after having kids to get their hemorrhoids checked.
Correct. Or people who have never had a colonoscopy and they have bleeding, please guys go and get that. So that's part of what
if you know you have hemorrhoids, even if they're asymptomatic, there could be other things happening in the digestive tract too. Right. So it's important to, listen to your body, even if it's not yelling, screaming at you. If you notice little things that aren't quite right, find the information out. If anything, educate yourself.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid Because if you get help now, you're not gonna have as many issues further on down the
So I'm
road.
gonna ask you to give us the top 5 reasons and ruminate that to the audience. So that
Let
they
me see if I
understand.
can remember them all. I'm not gonna look at my cheat sheet. Alright, number 1, hemorrhoids.
Correct.
Number 1 cause of rectal bleeding. See your doctor. Number 2 was
Anal fissure.
oh, that's right. Our fissures, our little cuts in the butt. Number 3 was diverticulosis.
Correct.
Different than diverticulitis.
Correct. Oh, so another thing I wanted to say. People confuse this all the time. Diverticulosis, diverticulitis. Itis after diverticulitis means that it is inflamed. Just like appendicitis or cholecystitis, pharyngitis, tonsillitis, laryngitis, otitis. Any itis is inflammation. Osis is just the process of the disease. So when you say diverticulosis, you say cholesterolosis, you say some other osis. Okay, osis means that the process is present but it's not inflamed. When you have diverticulitis, the bleeding is not so common. This is the caveat. Rectal bleeding with diverticular disease is more common with diverticulosis than with diverticulitis. So when you get inflamed colon, it doesn't bleed as much. It's the non-inflamed colon that spontaneously can sometimes bleed and you don't know why it causes that. So that's another caveat and something for the audience.
So diverticulosis
Is a
more
cause
common with rectal bleeding,
with rectal bleeding.
which is our number 3. Number 4 is inflammatory bowel disease.
Ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease together are grouped in inflammatory bowel disease. This subject causes patients to have diarrhea, lose watery bowel movements, and sometimes bleeding. So bloody bowel movements, you could have inflammatory bowel disease. And the last
lastly,
one,
colorectal cancer, of course.
anorectal, colorectal cancer, we lump all it together, but basically
Is there different colors of blood that would indicate different diseases, or?
That's a good question. The brighter the bleeding, the redder the color, the closer it is to the anus. So if you're having bright red blood, it's usually coming from around the anus, dark maroon blood, somewhere up in the colon, and sometimes blood can be blackish or completely black, and that means that it is coming from the stomach area because the acid has digested the blood and made it into another oxidative material, which the iron oxidizes and turns black. So
the darker blood is higher up in your digestive
and that's
system.
a good way to know. Another thing, sometimes you might have heard about the doctors giving people poop tests. You go home and you get a card and you can put it on it. That's called a hemoccult, meaning that there's not overt bleeding, but microscopically there may be some specks of blood in it. And that's also a relatively not as accurate indicator of bleeding inside. So when that happens, we have to worry about. Sometimes there are genetic tests, and now we can smear the poop on a card and send it for DNA analysis, and that can sometimes tell us about cancers. So rectal bleeding is a very good first step, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because every day, when I ask patients, why are you here? They're like, I have bleeding, I have this, I have that. So we talk about that. So after talking 20 minutes about the 5 causes, I wanted to go over prevention and treatment, because that is very important.
So how do you prevent hemorrhoids? Usually, but they don't go away once you have them.
So prevention is the best thing that you can do. So as far preventing the top 5 problems causing rectal bleeding: hemorrhoids, fissures, diverticulosis, IBD, colorectal cancer. Active daily life, exercise, drinking lots of fluids, and eating a fiber-rich food diet is so important for you.
Why is drinking water good for your digestive system?
So when you drink water, it not only flushes you, it hydrates you, it also mixes with your food. The bowel movement gets softer. If you add fiber, it absorbs like a sponge. and your bowel movements turn into pasty, bulky bowel movements that can come out easily. So water is very important. We are 90+% water, so we are cucumbers, guys. Drink lots of water, that'll help you. Exercise is important because all that mobility, all that motility of your intestines will move the bowel movements to the
Helps
next
with
portion.
digestion.
Help with digestion.
You can even do little tummy massages and things. So
So prevention is very important. Another thing in prevention is a colonoscopy. Colonoscopy is a preventative tool that is available now for most Americans age 45 and above who are asymptomatic. Go see your provider, go see your doctor, go see your gastroenterologist, your colorectal surgeon.
you might find out you have hemorrhoids that you didn't know about.
Correct, or something else. So colonoscopy is a tool where we pass a camera through the bottom and look inside. And this takes about 20 minutes. You're under anesthesia. You come out, we may take pictures, we take biopsies. That test is vital. I just had my colonoscopy, and that showed me that I am okay right now. I don't have to worry. So I still have to eat fresh food, fiber, drink lots of fluids, and exercise, and get checked. So those things will help you. Also, there are stool tests that I mentioned for colorectal cancer. So get those done if you qualify for those. So colonoscopy or the stool tests are important preventative tools that we have now.
Also prevention, I see someone mentioned having children and getting hemorrhoids, so don't have any babies.
That's, you can't say that,
Just
but
kidding.
you can have babies, but do realize that hemorrhoids pop out after babies. I think this is missing.
Very common.
This is missing from the OBGYN classes. Nobody talks about
You don't
that.
really get instructed on that in school, that hemorrhoids are a common cause of having children. So, but definitely we advise anyone to take care of that afterwards. Don't wait forever. So we see a lot of women that even if it's just something, doesn't put back together quite right, we can help you with that.
So then we come about treatment, guys. Treatment for all 5 conditions relies on your doctor and your provider. So for hemorrhoids, you're going to see a gastroenterologist or a colorectal surgeon. Mostly in America, most people are seeing colorectal surgeons because we handle these problems all the time.
Well, you can do everything, top
So
to
go
bottom.
see a proctologist or a booty doc somewhere, okay? Start eating extra fiber. Start eating extra fiber.
Fiber.
Very important.
It's a quick, easy Google high fiber foods. You'd be surprised. You'd be like, oh, that's my favorite. Like avocados, kiwis, mangoes.
And my favorite is the ground flaxseed, which you can dust on top of food.
Where did I see some ground flaxseed the other day? I was surprised.
It's magic pixie dust. It really works. One of our video people wants to get a colonoscopy. They're 39. If they are asymptomatic, then the colonoscopy at age 45. If they're bleeding any kind, please go see a doctor and get a colonoscopy. Because you can miss something like colorectal cancer, you can miss a hemorrhoid, a fissure, diverticulosis, inflammatory bowel disease. The top 5 things that are going to be a headache for you. So get checked out.
Basically, during a colonoscopy, you'd be able to diagnose most of these conditions.
Correct. So that's why that's a very important.
Would you be able to diagnose irritable bowel disease?
Irritable bowel disease is a diagnosis of exclusion, where you see patients with diarrhea and constipation and abnormal gas, distension, etc. You can't find a real cause. You do tests including stool tests, colonoscopy, x-rays, CAT scan, and a long detailed history, and you still don't find an answer. And then you say, I don't know what you have. I'm going to call it irritable bowel syndrome.
And that's how we invented irritable bowel syndrome.
Correct. So that's a syndrome where we are trying to still find answers, and there's a talk on that also that we gave. So please do look back at that also.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, like, all right, maybe I'm not 45 yet. Do I need a colonoscopy? If you're having some issues, seek a doctor. And they're going to be the one to tell you. And like we're discussing right now, colonoscopy is one of the main preventative diagnostic measures. So it's going to be the first thing.
It's a good idea. I mean, like, I see people every day getting scared, worried, coming to a doctor. Believe me, I was the same way. I got a colonoscopy this year, and
he waited till he was 50, even though he knows.
I know. But yes, everybody waits, and The point here is that we're all human. We all are here to help each other. And if we can get the message across to somebody else that you need a colonoscopy if you're having bleeding, you need to eat extra fiber if you're bleeding, you need to exercise, and if you need to drink water. Those things will really help you long term, guys.
And those are simple, solutions, but they help a lot of other things too. You find out like sleeping right, eating right, exercising, that takes care of your mental health, your physical health, whether it's your nervous system,
All
your
of it gets
digestive
better.
system. So there's a lot of benefits to those few little helpful things. So anything you can do that's positive for yourself.
And if you don't
And-
bleed from your bottom, that's priceless.
Then
Who
come
wants to
hang out
do
with
that?
us anyway. No, but I was gonna mention too, to always consider your family history.
Correct.
Maybe like your dad doesn't want to talk about his butt problems, but it might be important for you to know that he got a colonoscopy and they found a precancerous
Precancer
polyp.
polyp or cancer or something else in your family that could be
So,
related.
I mean, my family's pretty open. We like to talk about butts and stuff, but not everyone's family's like that.
Correct,
So,
correct. So please reach out on your annual Christmas dinner.
yeah.
Hello everyone, I would like to know who's had a colonoscopy. Raise
Question of
hand.
the meal.
No, don't bring it up there. Or may. But bring it up from time to time with your loved ones.
Mhm.
Tell them the DaBootyDoc Talk talks about it passionately. Getting checked, getting a test to
Just getting
find out.
information.
These 5 things can make or break your life, guys.
Yeah.
These are important topics. I really thought that during this time frame, I bring easy, relatable topic to everybody so that we can chat somewhat. Hope this is informational.
Yeah, and you know where to find us. So you can search us, contact our office. I'm willing to have a conversation with any of you about anything. So you call and ask for Sydney, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. And
Thank you, guys.
usually I can get him on the phone too. So if
Yes,
you
we
really
are-
want the doctor.
In Tampa, Florida, we are blessed to be here and taking care of our patients. But our goal is to educate and entertain people everywhere about common anorectal problems
Mhm.
and hopefully change their diet pattern. Because think about this, all these things are happening because your diet is not good. You're not exercising as much and you're not drinking water. So chuck some water, add an fiber supplement or fiber in your diet should be 25 to 35 grams a day.
Can you drink too much water?
Yes.
That's
Too much of anything
He
is
said
bad.
chug water. Drink a
What?
reasonable amount of water.
amount.
Drink more water than you think.
8 ounces, 8 glasses a day, okay? But drink lots of water and eat lots of fiber.
Yes. Can't emphasize the fiber enough.
Yeah, fiber is, I found out that it is a food component that should be ranked right up near fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, and we should just include fiber as its own class.
And give me an overall how fiber helps with rectal bleeding.
So fiber will make your bowel movement softer and bulkier and easy to push out.
So like if you have hemorrhoids, they might not bleed as much
because you're not forcing them out.
It's not like big hard clumps of poop. It's
Same thing with a fissure. If there's a cut, it allows the poop to pass gently through that area.
right. You don't want to stretch that area more than needed.
Same thing with diverticulosis, where you're having blood in the colon, and here the poop, if it's softer and easier to evacuate, will again cause less force on the colon to have problems.
Right.
Inflammatory bowel disease already has diarrhea and constipation mixed with it. There's inflammation, ulcers, and bleeding. So there you want to be a little more careful. Talk to your doctor about what medicines you may require, what diet you may require. Sometimes you may be on a low fiber diet instead of a high fiber diet.
So
And
a
then
little more specify with irritable bowel disease.
And then colorectal cancer, obviously, you will be dealing with specialists and talking about diet changes, treatments, surgeries, radiation, chemo, all that stuff. So this is all serious stuff, guys. Think about it. We are going to be out of time. Our half hour is up, but I enjoyed this talk very much.
Yeah.
I think I'm passionate about this, and hopefully you're not going to have bleeding butts.
But if you do,
go see a
then talk to
doctor
us.
or see a nurse practitioner or a provider or gastroenterologist.
Start somewhere.
So,
Ask your mom.
thank you
She
guys.
might know colorectal
I appreciate it.
Yeah, everyone have a good evening.
This is Shiraz and Sydney saying bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
We'll see you
Thank you.
next week. Check us out to find out what our topic is. I saw a couple of you post some comments, so feel free to leave more. And if you have further questions, give me a call. Ask for Sydney.
Thank you guys. DaBootyDoc Talk.
Have a good day.
Take care.